when Dumont Television started in New York, I was on one of the first on Dumont when Captain Video was on in its beginning days, and everything was live, and the lights were very hot. Oh, they were fierce. They would burn your eyes out and make you sweat profusely, and it was all ad-lib.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to my apartment, Start Ford. These are the folks I invited in. Some of them just came in because they felt like having a good time, and I want you to feel the same way.
I thought I was going into something else, motion pictures, but radio kept offering me better and better jobs. And then I ended up at WNAW, where for about 15 years I did the all-night show, the Milkman's Matinee. We kind of went over to Channel 13 and did Jazz Party, and before that I did television's Greenwich Village Party, which you were one of the few people to discover the kinescopes of, and that was a very unique television show. It was a free-form, real party set in supposedly my apartment, where there was no script and no plan.
Cy, from the position of Monique and the position that you're in, I think something could happen right here.
The minor player was Cy Coleman, and Cy was an old friend of mine, and I said, would you like to bring a trio together? And he said yes. And on the particular kinescope you have, he played Will You Still Be Mine, and I thought rather well. And he does this little toy piano thing, which is charming.
Well, you know, while I talk further with Don Hartman and Nancy Walker, I think we might invite you over to Cy Coleman's end of the room, because he's up to some nonsense over there. Monique is laughing at something he's playing, some toy he's playing with, so we'll find out what's cooking with Cy Coleman. Don? Thank you very much.
It's a small one.
Cy was coming up. Every week he was on, he gained exposure, personality-wise, talent-wise. He was at the beginning of his career.
I'm afraid he's the life of the party, whether I like it or not. He steals all. It's a good thing Sophia Loren's downstairs, not up here.
Where?
Yeah, that's what Don Hartman said. Nancy, you're going to do the Red Skelton show, aren't you?
Yes, next Tuesday. Mm-hmm.
And what about Broadway after that?
Well, I'm coming right back to do Wonderful Town at City Center.
That should be fun.
That night?
You play the Rosalind Russell part?
Yeah.
Oh, that should be a ball.
Very pleased about it.
Nancy was a very good friend of mine because I attended opening night of On the Town and became very entranced with the fact that Leonard Bernstein had been able to make a transition to copy one of his idols and one of my idols and somebody I knew as a young man, very young man, George Gershwin. And On the Town was Lenny's attempt to go from classical music to Gershwin. Only it was Bernstein, not Gershwin, and it was darn good. The score for On the Town was sensational. Nancy did a tune called The Taxi Song, which was not in the album, the original album. And I helped her get that recorded for Armed Forces Television, and she and I were good friends because of that. It was the best song for her in the show. She was a great talent musically. You wouldn't think that when you see Nancy in the later years on Rhoda and other shows. But she was a knockout as a little girl knocking over a song, both in Best Foot Forward and especially in On the Town.
I'm sitting here next to a very wonderful young lady who's always been one of my favorites, Nancy Walker, who is by way of being one of the funniest ladies on the American stage or TV screen when she wants to be. And she proved it, of course, in Fallen Angels, an old coward show, and On the Town she made what I think was musical comedy history, Best Foot Forward. Whenever she's given the chance, she steals everything in sight. The scenery...
Watch out.
Yeah, I will. Who's that very distinguished-looking gentleman behind you?
That's Mr. Hartman.
Is that Don Hartman? Don, how are you?
How are you all?
Welcome to the party.
Thank you very much.
Well, Don was head of Paramount, and he had left there not too happily, and I felt a little sorry for him because to head a studio, this happened also with Robert Evans, who headed Paramount also later. To be in that chair, to be a king of a studio, is an odd feeling. It's to lose that power is very sudden, no matter how easy they make it for you. No matter how, if they ease you out, it's still abrupt. And Hartman had been eased out quickly, and he felt the shock. And I thought having him on would make him feel better.
Don, of course, is, I'm not really very fond of him tonight because he's the boss of a girl I'd like to meet, and I don't think I'll ever meet him through him. Sophia Loren is working for him these days in a picture called Desire Under the Elms, because he's one of the men who's made Paramount Pictures as exciting as it's always been. You were head of Paramount for about 6 years, weren't you, Don?
Yeah, I can answer the first.
Yeah, about Sophia?
She's waiting for you outside.
Oh, she is? Well, I'm going to go right downstairs now. Let me out right this minute. But I don't believe that, Don. But I do believe, though, that you've got some wonderful excitement in store for Sophia and that Desire Under the Elms. Who did you team up with her for the story?
Tony Perkins and Burl Ives. And the idea for using a foreign girl for New England girl was Eugene O'Neill's, not mine. He wrote a screen treatment some time ago.
That's very interesting. And the treatment had the heroine with an accent?
I wanted to get that in fast so no one thinks we used her just for sex, to get her to wiggle through the picture.
Of course, Don,
She really acts.
she won't do any harm on the other aspect, though.
No, I'm not going to knock it either.
Well, this young lady sitting next to you, Nancy Walker, while I talked about her as a comedian, she proved in the Noel Coward show, Fallen Angels, she can do just about anything in the line of acting that might
Wasn't
be
that
doing.
fun? I love that show.
Did Noel Coward see the show, Nancy?
Second night we were open, yes.
And what did he say, or should I add?
I can't say it all. It was just marvelous.
Nice thing.
Yes, wonderful.
Don, you were head of one of the biggest studios in Hollywood, and you gave it up to head your own independent production company. Was that because you had more freedom, or was the other just too much work?
No, it was to have more freedom. And the fact that all of Hollywood was breaking up into independent companies,
Yes.
I thought I might as well have one of my own.
What else have you got lined up for your own studio now?
I just finished the matchmaker to Shirley Booth.
Well, Ben Hecht I met through John Barrymore. Ben was a great admirer of John Barrymore, and Ben I really admired personally.
With a gentleman who is part of the very fabulous era that began back in Chicago and wound up, well, perhaps across the world through motion pictures, plays, and books like Child of the Century, front page on the stage, and of course his two very wonderful films, which are still more or less samples of how to make a movie, Crime Without Passion and The Scoundrel.
He was quite a great American writer and a charming Bohemian intellectual, and represented the apex of the village-type literary brain that you could find at that time.
Mr. Ben Hecht, of course, is a very modest gentleman. He can afford to be at this stage of the game. But I do want to talk to him about something that's close to his heart right now, because he's about... I don't know how old he is, but when it comes to his work, he's about 23, and he's as enthusiastic about Winkleberg as anybody can be these days. Welcome to our little salon, our little abattoir. Very nice to have you with us, sir.
Winkleberg, you should mention, is not a gentleman, but a play.
He's not a gentleman at all. As a matter of fact, Winkleberg is inspired by a man who I wanted to have on this series in the first show. When I was preparing this program for television, we filmed in the village. Everybody I thought was village. And the one man who escaped me because he was in Chicago at the time was Maxwell Bodenheim. I knew Max from the San Remo in the village, and I thought he had such a tremendously moving life. When I heard you had taken up the typewriter to draw a portrait of Mr. Maxwell Bodenheim Winkelberg, I was very, very excited.
Well, I was impressed by Bodenheim since he was about 18. He fell into misfortune very early, and he remained there, embedded, for about 50 years. He has the distinction of being the only poet in recorded history to have been murdered. He's part of the misfortune.
Interesting, I didn't realize
And
that.
he represented a type of writer that was almost extinct when he was born, a writer who did nothing but write and drink. And we were friends in Chicago and sort of enemies afterwards, but always friends in between, our feuds. And the play I did about Bodenheim has been criticized because Bodenheim wasn't supposed to be a big enough poet to write a play about. He's one of the best poets we ever had, despite the fact he was murdered, despite the fact that he was a bit of a drunkard. And his death stirred no sorrow that I could detect in anybody. It just kept me worrying about 3-4 years.
So you wrote the play.
And I don't know if I've stirred any sorrow now, except in myself off and on.
Well, the play is the most challenging play for villagers or anyone who knows or loves the spirit of a poet. It's at the Renata Theater, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, it's in a wonderfully named street, Bleecker Street.
Yes, I know. Very close to where he spent a good deal of his life.
The gutter outside of our theater was where he slept often.
Well, Ben Hecht, I have a half hour or 2 hours to talk to you, and I'm going to have to get back to you. But
Thank you for that.
thank you for coming over here and talking for a second. Fabulous, Mr. Ben Hecht. Ben Hecht, I think I know what I should do after talking to you. How about introducing you to a pretty girl? Isn't that what's supposed to happen at a party?
Very nice.
She's a very famous Metropolitan Opera singer and a very lovely beauty. Mimi Benzel, Ben Hecht.
Well, how do you do, Mr. Hecht?
So pleased to have you here, except
Thank
of course
you.
when we see you, we want to hear you sing. And I hope someday you'll come over with some music and let Cy play along here. For
Oh,
a
I'd
change.
love to. I was fascinated by your little piano, Cy.
Oh, thank you very much.
I wondered if perhaps I could take it home, because that's just about the range I have these days with this cold.
You got a cold?
Have I got a cold?
Then take her over to the bar and get her some medicine, will you?
Medicine? Well, I don't know. What do you
Mimi
have?
Benzel, who's been so sensational at the Cotillion Room when she's turned very democratically to any kind of music she thinks might please you. Now, I'd like to turn very democratically to one thing I know pleases all the boys, a very beautiful girl. And Cy Coleman. And I wouldn't be surprised if something happened here. Shall we find out right now? Would you, there's one thing you do in the album, The Man I Love, My Man.
My Man.
It's so wonderful. I play it on the Make Believe Ballroom. Would you do that tonight, please?
Yes, certainly. Thank you.
Sur cette terre, mon seul bien, mon seul bonheur, c'est mon homme. J'ai donné tout ce que j'ai, mon amour et tout mon cœur, à mon homme. Et même la nuit, quand je rêve, c'est de lui, ah bah, de mon homme. Et ce n'est pas qu'il soit beau, qu'il soit riche ni costaud, mais je l'aime, cet idiot, il me fout des coups, il me prend mes sous, je suis à bout, mais malgré tout, que voulez-vous? Oh, my man, I love him so. You'll never know, all my life is just despair. But I don't care, quand ses yeux sur moi se posent, j'en viens toute chose. Je l'ai tellement dans la peau, qu'au moindre mot, il me ferait faire n'importe quoi. Je tuerai ma foi, je sens qu'il me rendrait infâme. Je ne suis qu'une femme, et je l'ai tellement dans la peau.
What a girl, isn't she? Oh, she sure is. How beautiful, too. You got something cooked up for us there?
I'm fooling around with a Matt Dennis tune called Will You Still Be Mine?
That's a lot of fun. And Sandy, I want you to warm up one there in the bullpen in case we get a chance. I'd like to get around to you. Cy Coleman, man about town. So glad you could come. See you next week at the same time. Bring your friends. Don't ring the bell next door because the fellow gets angry. Till then, thank you and good night.
Hugh Hefner saw the show, and properly so, because it was off the air. He thought, why not? When I'll do it another way. But he did take my music, Cy Coleman, did take the general concept, and he did it in black tie and formally and with girls in evening gowns and much more elegantly. And he did it his way. It wasn't the Greenwich Village party, it was Hugh Hefner's party. And as such, I thought, well, writers and painters for years have taken and derived from the last guy something that they did their touch with, and so it goes. So he didn't steal it, he simply was inspired by that. And so, fine for Hef, you know.
Art Ford's Greenwich Village Party has been a Channel 5 presentation.
After a long, hard day of doing God knows whatever the hell it is you do, don't you just love the fact that you can sit back and relax and watch Biograph Days, Biograph Nights, where you can relax and watch the golden memories of your past? Hey, remember that beefaroni ad? And where were you the first time you saw that Ajax ad? Oh, things were simpler then. I had little to no responsibilities. Not like now. Out of work. 30-something. Nothing to do with my life but sit around and watch some show that reruns commercials I used to avoid watching in the first place. Biograph Days, Biograph Nights, you can have it.
Welcome to my nightmare. Wow. There's some vinegar smell. gallon today. It was eaten up by his film collection. It's right in here. The big one was when I got a call about the Clio Awards. The next room. You guys have no concept. Yeah, come on in. Right. This is all part of a collection that I have never gotten to in about 15 years. And the owner of the Clio Awards was in a drug deal. They burnt down his townhouse, and there, folks, is films that I had just pulled out of sales films, commercials, regional films, spot advertisements. Great history of television that I've never been able to get to.
George, stop the machine. Stop the machine.
This film's so old it just breaks up in your fingers.
Can't you patch it together again?
Not a chance. Celluloid's only good for 20 years or so, and then it gets so brittle you can't hardly touch it.
You mean that we can't even see it? Now that we have it?
There's just nothing you can do about it.
Nothing you can do about it. Never had the world known a more wonderful way of recording knowledge. But now it was realized that it wasn't permanent, that half a century of history was about to decay out of existence.